The internet and globalization have greatly bridged the gaps in information and culture between nations in recent decades. Today, collaboration is in higher demand than ever, and physical distance is no longer a barrier to working together, thanks to the rapid advances in technology and data accessibility. Students are now encouraged to prepare for a future where face-to-face meetings may often be replaced by online discussion with colleagues worldwide. At the University of East Anglia, Dr. Liliana Harding has launched a collaborative online international learning initiative, allowing students to work jointly on projects with peers from universities around the globe. Hello everyone, and welcome to the COIL series of the Norwich Economic Publications podcast. In this episode, we're excited to showcase exceptional students' work from Dr. Liliana's project, a presentation on global trade and marine pollution prepared by 5 outstanding students from universities across the world. Now, we are pleased to hand over the spotlight to this remarkable work. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ollie and welcome to our COIL Group 2 presentation, Cross-Border Environmental Concerns, Global Trade and Marine Pollution. In this presentation, we are going to be talking about how can international cooperation and policies address this issue of cross-border marine pollution, whilst also promoting conservation efforts to help protect the ocean. In our presentation, we will cover what is marine pollution with a definition and its main causes and effects. We will then talk about the policies that are being introduced or that are already in place, and then move on to the conservation techniques that are used to help protect marine life. And finally, we will talk about the outcomes of the policies that are in place and what we hope they will achieve. So what is marine pollution? Marine pollution is defined by the National Geographic Society as a combination of chemicals and trash, most of which comes from land sources and is washed or blown into the ocean. This pollution results in damage to the environment, to the health of all organisms, and to economic structures worldwide. The problem of marine pollution includes a variety of contaminants and processes that negatively impact both the health of the oceans and the lives of countless species within them. Some of the contaminants we will talk about today, with devastating effects, plastic and oil pollution, alongside the effects of invasive species and harmful emissions that come around due to global trade and transportation. This problem not only affects the oceanic ecosystems and marine life, but also has impacts outside of the ocean. Marine pollution has caused human health concerns, as seen in the study by Exeter Uni researchers as part of the SOPHIE project. And furthermore, industries can be greatly impacted by the damages of pollution, such as the fishing and tourism industries, which show real-world economic impact of global trade and marine pollution.
Hello everyone, and thank you Ollie for that wonderful introduction. My name is Jack Kinkus, and I am a junior at Middlebury College in the United States in my third year of studying economics, and I'm here at UEA for this fall semester studying global trade. So I'm proud to say I'm part of the UEA cohort of this global team. And for my section, I'm here to talk about some of the effects from global trade and specifically how they result in marine pollution. And to start off with, I wanted to start with a unique form of pollution that I didn't really think of before starting to research this topic, and that is the introduction of invasive species. So, trade has resulted in the introduction of numerous invasive species, many a times through ballast water. And ballast water is any water that's held in the tank of container ships and freight ships that helps to stabilize the ships as they navigate high seas and foul weather. And when this water is mismanaged, it results in the introduction of a foreign species from the ship's point of origin to its destination. And when I use the term organisms, I want to specify that it doesn't have to be fish or plants. It can also include things like phytoplankton and other microorganisms that we might not see with the naked eye. A great example of this invasive species introduction through ballast water is zebra mussels. Currently, zebra mussels are ravaging numerous freshwater and brackish water ecosystems around North America, specifically Canada and the US, and they're native to Eastern Europe and Western Russia. I know in my local ecosystem at home of the Indian River Lagoon, they seriously outcompete some of the native oyster species that help to filter chemicals out of the water. So it's resulted in reducing water quality, while these invasive zebra mussels outcompete our native species. Additionally, on the note of invasive species, The trade of exotic animals is a lesser popularized form of international trade, obviously, but the trade of those animals themselves has led to their introduction into foreign ecosystems. So again, networks of exotic animal trading are less popular, and I definitely didn't think of them when starting this project. But unfortunately, it is common for these animal species to escape captivity, and just like any other invasive species, these former pets have the ability to cripple native ecosystems and really outcompete native species. A great example of this is the lionfish that was originally imported to the US as an exotic pet. And we see their importation start around the same time where trade with their home region begins to pick up, and that is Southeast Asia and East Asia. And they escape captivity in the Atlantic Ocean sometime around 1985, again, which correlates as trade with China at the time, specifically imports to the US, was increasing drastically, and they really do outcompete native fish species and take over environments. So I just want to follow that up with a quick graphic of, here we see around 1985, imports of traded goods, really ramp up between China to the US. And at that same time, the lionfish are introduced to the US and begin to run rampant and escape. And here now in 2018, we see the many different cells of lionfish populations, which have grown on by themselves, but have ended up being introduced through that foreign trade, exotic animal trade with other regions. So here, just a very easily observed example of how invasive species are imported as a result of global trade and end up getting released. So to pivot off of that, the thing I probably thought of the most when going into this project as a harmful result from global trade was the emissions from trade. And specifically in this section, I want to harp on how these emissions are not only bad for the atmosphere, but the detrimental effects they have on marine environments and how they're a form of pollution, and that's affecting marine environments drastically, really. So trade as a whole, as many of us know, is very emissions intensive, and the use of fossil fuel intensive transportation methods still dominates trade today. A lot of container ships, air freight, and trucking, obviously all very fossil fuel intensive. I know there's been some methods to pivot away from fossil fuels, but they still dominate the trading atmosphere today. And we know that 7% of total anthropogenic carbon emissions are linked directly to trade. That is, 7% of all human carbon emissions that are the result of humans, 7% of those are from trade in that direct, very, very small scope. And then we also know that roughly 30% of all fossil fuel combustion for transportation is driven by international trade. So in the larger scope, that includes people going to and from work. There's even more emissions than we originally know are directly linked that are a result of trade. And again, without regulation, the OECD predicts that emissions from trade could increase 4 times from 2010 to 2050. I know some of my group mates will get into that regulation and how international organizations plan to tackle this emissions from trade issue. But it's important to recognize that trade is still very emissions intensive, and without intervention can reach a dangerous scenario. So you may be thinking, how does this affect marine environments? And this is what I really want to elaborate on because as it relates to our project. So the effects of these emissions are especially detrimental to fragile marine ecosystems. As we know, the greenhouse effect resulting from these emissions has been able to increase atmospheric and ocean temperatures over recent years. And as these temperatures rise, we see sensitive species die off, like coral and microorganisms that sequester carbon in our oceans. And on the graphic to the right, I just want to exemplify and demonstrate how these emissions are contributing to a positive feedback loop of temperature rise. So in step 1, where we would see this anthropogenic release of greenhouse gases through trade, leads to a continued greenhouse effect that helps to increase ocean temperatures. That leads to population die-off, specifically of sensitive species like coral and microorganisms or other phytoplankton. And then as those animals die off, ecosystems are unable to sequester their original amount of greenhouse gases, specifically carbon. And then we see those gases release back into the atmosphere, again contributing to that positive feedback loop and detrimental destruction of these fragile marine ecosystems. And next up, I'm excited to pass it on to my group mates to continue this discussion of effects of global trade on marine environments.
So to add on to what Jack was saying, global trade has many negative impacts on marine ecosystems. So one of the first impacts is oil spills. So as we know, oil is a very hot commodity around the world, and it is often transported on oil tankers. So these tankers can face many complications, just like any other man-made object, and they can have leaks or in really bad cases, get destroyed. And during this time, all that oil is kind of leaking into the ocean and impacting marine life. So we know oil rigs are very common, but oil tanker disasters actually account for around 10% of global marine oil pollution. And these oil spills can destroy habitats and suffocate different species, which in the long run can lead to extinction. As you can see on the right in the picture, that is a species that has been impacted by an oil spill. Noise pollution is also a negative impact of global trade. So cargo vessels will emit around 190 decibels of noise on average. And a lot of marine life, they use sound to communicate and hunt for food and just carry out a lot of their daily activities. And this noise tends to move through water very fast as opposed to land. So all these species are getting impacted by the noise and they're not able to carry out a lot of their daily functions, which leads to negative impacts on their bodies. So for example, some problems that researchers have found amongst these species include increased stress hormones, lower reproduction and immunity, reduced foraging, poor body conditions, intense breathing rates and metabolic activity, and slow growth rates, which again could lead to population extinction. So there's also vessel collisions. An increase in global trade means there's going to be an increase in shipping vessels around the globe, obviously. These vessels will tend to collide with marine life, usually more notably bigger species. So whales and dolphins are usually culprits of this. It impairs their motor functions and could even lead to death, which could wipe populations out in the future. There's also habitat destruction. So with the goods that we are trading around the world, this manufacturing to get those goods requires materials from certain habitats, these raw materials. And since we're using those materials, we're breaking down those habitats for certain species, which again displaces them and makes it hard for them to live. There's also an expansion in coastal towns. There's an expansion in ports. Since there's more trade, there should be bigger ports. This could cut into different habitats, which displace marine life kind of everywhere. And a lot of the other problems that I've listed above also kind of lead to just habitat destruction. For example, oil spills will make it uninhabitable for species to live in there because it's too toxic. When talking about global trade, it's also to examine the relationship between trade and coastal development. So why do coastal towns encourage so much trade when it's so bad for the environment? So coastal towns originally welcomed trade because it brought prosperity. The economy boomed because there was an increase in jobs. There was they needed help like unloading ships and loading them and whatever it may be. There's an increase in trades of goods and ideas, and that always breeds innovation and technological advancement. There's more job opportunity, as stated before, and which spurs the urbanization of these areas, and more job opportunity also kind of brings in more people, which leads to population increase, which can be helpful in certain towns. So it can also serve as an entry point to other regions. So for example, if a certain region is landlocked and is still close to these coastal towns, they can still kind of use it to help their own economy. As I stated before, it encouraged technological advancement, which is imperative for towns to grow. And since these coastal towns are being, I guess, they're more in like the public eye, it increases tourism, which helps the economy. However, an increase in tourism also hurts the environment. So here are the three main areas that trade kind of negatively impacts the environment. So there's an impact on the ocean, an impact on the town, as well as an impact on the air. The graphic on the right does a great job at showing how these areas are impacted and what trade is doing. So for example, to start off, impact on the ocean, there's, as Jack stated before, there's an introduction of invasive species. Since these boats are traveling from different places, they're bringing different species along with them, which can displace the present marine life. As I stated before, there's a lot of habitat destruction due to just oil spills and overall litter. there's people on the boats that are contributing to the litter, and increase in tourism. People are throwing things in the ocean, etc. And there's also impacts on the town and land. There's coastal erosion. Sea levels are rising, which can erode the actual land itself. There's also the physical docking of the boat, which is also impacting the land. There's an increased use of resources. Again, since they want to expand these ports, they're basically hacking down the environment to be able to build those ports up. Just like the ocean, there's also wildlife interference on the land, which is, again, just creates kinks in the ecosystem, which is not good overall. There's also an impact on the air. Obviously, due to the kind of oil the ship needs to run and the gasoline it needs to run, sea levels are going to rise due to the increase in greenhouse gases that are being emitted into the air. And again, when sea levels rise, these coastal towns are more prone to natural disasters. So hurricanes, tsunamis, all this stuff kind of might impact them negatively and destroy the towns, as well as kind of just impact anything around living around it.
There are many different policies each country puts into place to try to prevent the amount of harm they do to the ocean. While individual countries do pass important and helpful regulations, there needs to be more effort in working together to create international trade policies so every country is expected to follow the same rules. This will help make sure every country does their part in helping to protect the ocean and marine life that live there. Some of the current international policies in place include fisheries management, and marine protected areas. For regional fishery management organizations, this helps establish conservation and management measures to ensure the sustainable use of fish stocks. This RFMO in the bottom right, in particular, is for regulations on tuna, and these different areas show the different commissions each part of the world is managed by. For marine protected areas, these are specific areas where the importation and exportation of resources can be regulated. Green shipping initiatives is another way countries are trying to use cleaner fuels and technologies. The Clydebank Declaration is the most recent large-scale initiative to try to reduce the amount of gas emissions from shipping. The declaration had a total of 22 countries, including the United States, Canada, Japan, and many other European countries, including Spain. The intentions of this declaration are to encourage green shipping corridors and to create routes that are specifically zero emission. This declaration is a great step in the right direction for many countries, and we need to continue to do this moving forward.
Let's see some real cases in which our attempts in facilitating global trade have actually ended up destroying marine life. This is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It happened in 2010, and it resulted from a blowout during drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, Mocondo prospect. So basically, along with high-pressure methane gas, the failure caused a catastrophic explosion, which unleashed millions of barrels of crude oil into the ocean. There's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and this is like a massive area in the Pacific Ocean. Maybe you've heard of it. Here, tons of plastic and trash have collected and created a giant floating mess. Now we're going to see some numbers. This is the number of oil spills registered each year. We also know that 90% of seabirds are estimated to have already ingested dangerous plastics. And we know that more than 8 million tons of plastics are dumped to the ocean each year. That's like 2,000 Eiffel Towers being dumped into the ocean each year. So it's clear that something has to be done. There are some innovative projects making real progress out there in marine conservation, like these ones. But considering the gravity of the situation, we know that larger scale action is needed. Efforts to control and minimize the effect that trade has on marine pollution have been taken, like these ones. These are international agreements and regulations, such as the ones set by these 5 organizations. They collectively work to mitigate the huge impact that trade has on marine pollution, and they establish global standards, they regulate shipping practices, they sanction the overexploitation of marine species, they influence trade-related activities, and they address other environmental concerns. And they aim to promote sustainable practices, responsible shipping, and protect marine ecosystems in general from the negative consequences of global trade. So by proposing ideas like cleaner shipping, encouraging eco-friendly packaging, and recognizing the conservation efforts of companies and countries, we're trying to aim for a positive shift in the way we trade globally. And definitely these changes may seem small, but they actually can create a big impact, and they can help us transition to a trade in which we protect our oceans instead of exploiting it as we have been doing these last years.
To conclude, the aim of this presentation was to discuss the cross-border environmental concerns, specifically analysing those around marine pollution, and to provide solutions and policies to help minimise and resolve these issues. Throughout this presentation, we have done this through our explanations of these causes of marine pollution: invasive species, the harmful emissions from trade, ranging from oil, noise pollution, vessels and habitat destruction, alongside the trade and coastal development sectors. We also presented the devastating facts and statistics on the amount of pollution and contaminants that we release into the ocean to show how bad this situation has become. We believe the policies we discussed, ranging from conservation techniques, for example the Seabin project, and to the incentives and programs for companies to ship and trade whilst keeping the environment in mind, will have a positive effect on this issue and can be even more successful with greater support and acknowledgement. Therefore, we thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope you keep this issue at the forefront of your minds.